The room fell silent the moment they stepped through the grand doors. Cameras clicked, flashes streaked across the polished floor, and yet, the murmurs began almost immediately. Some were soft, almost imperceptible, while others escalated quickly, growing louder with every step they took. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had made their entrance at the Governor Awards 2025, and the reception was far from what anyone could have predicted. But what made this moment so charged, so explosive, and so instantly memorable? Was it the couple themselves, or something else entirely simmering beneath the surface of the glittering event? You're about to find out what really happened, what people whispered when they thought no one was listening, and why this night would leave a mark on the royal couple's reputation that no press release could ever erase. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, the Governor Awards might appear as a glamorous gathering, a celebration of achievements across politics, philanthropy, and culture. High ceilings, elegant chandeliers, rows of perfectly polished chairs, and tables dressed in the most exquisite linens. Everything screamed refinement. But the air was thick with anticipation and, unexpectedly, a layer of hostility. You could feel it. It wasn't just the subtle side glances or the slight stiffening of posture when Harry and Meghan approached. There was a collective, almost tangible tension, like a storm forming quietly behind the calm. What had started as excitement for the event quickly transformed into a cocktail of apprehension, judgment, and anticipation of spectacle. The couple, known worldwide for their charisma, for the very real and raw moments they've shared with the public, were no strangers to scrutiny. Yet nothing could have fully prepared them, or anyone present, for the response that awaited them. Meghan, poised and composed, wore a gown that shimmered under the soft glow of the ballroom lighting. Every movement was measured, every smile precise, and yet, she could not fully mask the flicker of unease. Harry, tall and undeniably regal in his demeanor, exuded calm confidence on the surface, but his eyes betrayed something more. They scanned the room constantly, noting the subtle reactions, the shifting gazes, and the occasional smirk that betrayed the undercurrent of tension. This was not merely an entrance. It was a confrontation without words, a silent test of resilience, perception, and public favor. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, it began. A low, rumbling noise, hesitant at first, but quickly gaining volume. Whispers erupted from table to table. The audience, composed of dignitaries, celebrities, and influential figures, reacted in a way that few could have anticipated. A few voices, carried by the open space of the hall, expressed disapproval. Then came the first audible murmur of discontent. A cough, a shuffle of feet, a muttered comment that seemed harmless but reverberated with meaning. By the time they reached the center of the room, the whispers had escalated into clear booing and, in some corners, laughter that carried an unmistakable edge of derision. Why did this happen? Was it an orchestrated protest? A spontaneous outburst fueled by pent-up frustrations and long-standing controversies surrounding the couple? Or something even more intricate, an undercurrent of political tension, social commentary, and the world's fascination with their every move? The complexity of this moment is what made it riveting. On one hand, the event itself was a symbol of recognition and honor. On the other hand, the reception they received reflected a brewing storm of opinion, judgment, and speculation. And it was all unfolding in real time, captured by hundreds of cameras and thousands of eyes, both present and across the globe through instant media coverage. To understand the depth of this moment, one must consider the context. Over the past few years, Harry and Meghan's public presence has been anything but ordinary. Their every statement, appearance, and social initiative has been dissected, celebrated, and criticized with equal fervor. In 2025, the world has seen an evolution of public sentiment, a mixture of admiration, skepticism, and at times, outright hostility. Their advocacy, lifestyle, and occasional controversial choices have polarized audiences worldwide. Some see them as champions of progressive change, voices of conscience in an outdated establishment. Others view them as disruptors, outsiders to traditions they are perceived to challenge. The Governor Awards, intended as a celebration of achievement, inadvertently became the stage upon which these conflicting perceptions collided. But beyond the general tension, there were subtler, more intricate dynamics at play. Those closest to the couple, advisors, friends, and aides, understood the unspoken rules of such events. The royal protocol, the careful choreography of movements and gestures, the timing of smiles and nods. All of these were designed to maintain poise under scrutiny. Yet, nothing can fully predict the human element. A hiss from the crowd, an ill-timed laugh, or the slight rolling of eyes that catches a television camera's gaze. Each reaction, minor in isolation, compounded to create a mosaic of disapproval and shock that was almost tangible. Meghan and Harry were not just entering a room. They were stepping into a crucible of perception, where every action and every pause carried amplified significance. As they made their way toward the stage, the environment around them seemed almost surreal. The chandeliers reflected light off of polished silverware. The murmur of conversations rose and fell like waves against a cliff, and all the while, the couple moved with deliberate grace, aware that each step was being recorded, analyzed, and scrutinized. But despite the elegance and composure, the air was electric with tension. Observers noted subtle exchanges between audience members, small nods that seemed conspiratorial, murmured comments that suggested prior knowledge or premeditated responses. The question arose again and again, why this reception? And more importantly, what would Harry and Meghan do next? At this point, audience speculation became part of the spectacle. Social media buzzed before the event was even over, hashtags trending with a mix of outrage, sympathy, and disbelief. Clips of the entrance circulated immediately, some highlighting the boos, others focusing on Harry's calm demeanor, Meghan's poised smile, or even the audience's unexpected reactions. Each clip, each image, each shared opinion added layers to the story. The evening was no longer just about awards. It had transformed into a public referendum on the couple's presence, influence, and acceptability in certain high-profile circles. This was a pivotal moment. An intersection of celebrity, royalty, and social dynamics that few events have ever achieved with such intensity. Yet the tension didn't only reside in the public gaze. Backstage, aides and organizers monitored the unfolding scene with a mixture of alarm and fascination. Security teams noted shifts in body language, subtle gestures, and the unspoken communication that passed among the guests. Whispers of previous conflicts and rumors surfaced, feeding into the already heightened anxiety. Some insiders had prepared for a smooth evening, expecting polite applause and recognition, but what unfolded was far from predictable. It became increasingly clear that this event was no ordinary awards ceremony. It was a test of public patience, perception, and the couple's ability to maintain dignity under pressure. And just when it seemed that the tension had reached its peak, another layer of drama emerged. A seemingly innocuous comment from a prominent guest was caught on camera and instantly dissected by media analysts. The audience's reaction shifted subtly but noticeably, revealing fractures, loyalties, and alliances that few had anticipated. The couple's every movement now carried a dual narrative: what was visible to the public and what remained hidden in the undercurrents of elite social maneuvering. It was a dance of perception, influence, and silent negotiation. With Harry and Meghan at the center of a storm they could neither fully control nor ignore. By the time they reached the podium to accept the attention and recognition that the event ostensibly promised, the room had transformed from celebratory to charged, from polite to tense, from orderly to unpredictable. And as they stood there, momentarily pausing to take in the scene, a hush fell over the room. An anticipatory silence that seemed to hold the collective breath of everyone present. It was the kind of silence that signals a turning point, the threshold before revelation, before confrontation, before an incident that will be discussed, replayed, and analyzed for years to come. But what happened next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The doors swung open again, this time wider, as if announcing the arrival of more than just two people. It was a calculated moment, the sort that photographers and media teams dream of, yet even the most prepared cameras couldn't fully capture the atmosphere that descended on the Governor Awards that evening. Every head turned, every eye followed, And then came the first audible sign that this night would not follow the predictable rhythm of applause and polite chatter. A murmur, almost dismissive, almost casual, but enough to send a ripple across the room. You could feel it. Could you imagine walking into a room, fully aware that everyone is watching, everyone is judging, and some are even hostile? How would you hold yourself? How would you mask the tension? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle moved forward with poise, every step deliberate, every gesture controlled, yet their awareness of the undercurrent was unmistakable. Harry's eyes scanned quickly, registering subtle signs. A hand pressed to a chin in skepticism, a barely concealed smirk, someone suppressing a laugh at the couple's expense. Meghan's expression was equally measured, yet there was a flicker, a brief tightening at the corners of her mouth, that betrayed the undercurrent of nerves. This wasn't simply about decorum or royal protocol. It was about navigating a minefield of perception in real time, in front of cameras and a crowd whose reactions were impossible to predict. The room itself seemed to react with the couple's every move. Chandeliers shimmered, reflecting light across the polished surfaces, but the elegance of the space only heightened the tension. Every whispered comment, every cough, seemed amplified, echoing against the walls. It was as if the very architecture of the room conspired to magnify the audience's unease, and the couple's presence transformed it from an event into a spectacle of human judgment. Could anyone have predicted this? Was it a premeditated reaction or a spontaneous release of collective tension that had been simmering under the surface for months, maybe even years? The answers were as elusive as the flickering glances exchanged among the guests. And then the murmurs became more distinct, forming words that cut through the air with clarity. "Not them again," someone muttered. Another whispered, "Why are they even here?" You could hear the subtle shift in tone, the way the comments became less private and more communal, forming a current that swept through the room. Some guests looked down at their programs, pretending to be engrossed in the printed schedule, while others exchanged conspiratorial glances, as if confirming a shared opinion. The tension was not just audible, it was tangible. You could feel it pressing in from every side, a weight that could unseat composure if you let it. And yet, despite the initial hostility, there were flashes of support. A nod here, a soft smile there, small gestures that suggested someone in the room recognized the courage it took for Harry and Meghan to enter at all. The contrast was sharp. On one hand, disapproval and judgment. On the other, acknowledgement and respect. It was this contradiction that heightened the drama, keeping everyone, including the couple themselves, on edge. How do you maintain grace when the room seems to teeter between hostility and admiration? How do you project calm when every micro-expression of the audience becomes a potential headline, a viral clip, or a whispered rumor? The energy shifted again as the couple moved further into the space. The initial murmur of disapproval morphed into a more organized form of expression, a mix of low-level boos, quick chuckles, and more assertive hisses. It was almost as if the audience was conducting its own experiment, testing boundaries, gauging reactions, measuring the couple's resolve. Each reaction, small in isolation, became exponentially more impactful as it built upon the previous one. And in that compounding effect, tension spiraled. The cameras, capturing every angle, didn't just record the moment. They broadcast it, amplified it, and ensured that every reaction, intentional or not, became part of the larger narrative. How would Harry and Meghan respond? Would they falter, or would they rise above the scrutiny and maintain the image the world had come to expect? To understand the full scope of this moment, one must consider not just the audience, but also the network of unseen dynamics at play. Advisors whispered in the wings, security teams subtly shifted positions, and organizers exchanged worried glances. There was a collective awareness that this entrance, already loaded with tension, could escalate at any moment. The couple's every move carried dual meaning, one for the public, polished and carefully choreographed, and one for the insiders, nuanced and strategic. The room was a chessboard, and every step, every glance, was a calculated play in a game whose rules were constantly shifting. Could the couple anticipate every reaction? Could they remain untouchable amidst such intense scrutiny? That uncertainty alone was enough to make the moment crackle with drama. And then, As they approached the central area where the stage awaited, a subtle but unmistakable shift occurred. The murmurs grew louder, more synchronized, almost as if the audience had agreed, silently, collectively, to register their discontent. A few voices stood out, carrying above the rest, clear enough for anyone paying attention to catch. A mixture of derision, disbelief, and even anger. Yet simultaneously, there were pockets of murmured support, whispers of encouragement, subtle applause suppressed behind hands. The contrast, stark and visceral, created a psychological tension that was almost unbearable. You could almost see the mental calculations happening in real time. Harry gauging the room, Meghan measuring her expression, both maintaining an outer calm while internally navigating a maze of judgment and expectation. Adding to the complexity, the seating arrangements, once carefully designed to maximize optics and social harmony, now played a role in the evolving drama. Some tables, strategically positioned for visibility, became focal points for reactions, both positive and negative. Those in key vantage points could influence perception across the room, subtly directing the energy of the space. Could a single disapproving guest at the right table ignite a chain reaction? As it happened, small gestures, a turned head, a raised eyebrow, a whispered comment, triggered exactly that kind of domino effect. The room was alive with unspoken tension, and Harry and Meghan were at its epicenter. Meanwhile, social media feeds began to anticipate the spectacle even before the couple reached the stage. Insiders had already begun posting subtle hints of the unfolding drama, captions dripping with anticipation. Guess who just arrived? And the room is tense. Within seconds, the virtual space became an extension of the physical tension, amplifying it for audiences worldwide. Every facial expression, every micro-gesture, became fodder for speculation and analysis. The line between private event and public trial blurred, leaving the couple exposed in ways that few could navigate without composure, strategy, and a deep reservoir of emotional control. How do you step into such a spotlight and remain unshaken when the world is watching, commenting, and passing judgment in real time? By the time they reached the edge of the stage, the energy had reached an almost unbearable pitch. The couple paused, momentarily taking in the reactions around them, acknowledging the dual reality of applause and jeers, support and disdain. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as if the room held its collective breath, waiting for the next move, the next reaction, the next word that might tip the balance of this delicate, high-stakes drama. Every camera lens, every eye, every whisper had converged on this instant. And it was in that charged pause that the unthinkable happened, a reaction, subtle yet unmistakable, that would ripple outward, ensuring that the rest of the evening would be talked about for years to come. The first clear, unified sound of disapproval broke across the room, a coordinated murmur that swelled into a crescendo of audible hisses and restrained boos. The carefully maintained composure of the couple was tested, their poised entrance now an arena for raw, unfiltered emotion from the audience. It was a moment that seemed scripted for suspense, as if the night itself had conspired to create maximum drama. And yet, amidst the chaos, an undercurrent of intrigue lingered. Whispers backstage hinted that not all reactions were spontaneous. Some, insiders claimed, had been planned, orchestrated to provoke a response, to test the couple's resolve, and to fuel speculation that would dominate headlines for days. As the couple stepped forward, the tension thickened. Every gesture, every step, carried amplified significance. Who would break first, the audience or the couple? Could Harry maintain his composure in the face of mounting derision? Could Meghan continue to smile while inwardly calculating the reactions around her? And then, just when it seemed the situation could not escalate further, someone in the audience did something entirely unexpected, something that would make the cameras pivot, the whispers intensify, and the narrative of the evening shift in ways no one could have predicted. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The backstage area was a different world entirely. While the ballroom glimmered with chandeliers, polished floors, and the charged energy of hundreds of eyes, behind the heavy velvet curtains a quieter storm was brewing. This was where the true orchestration of the evening existed, where whispers carried weight, and where alliances, visible and hidden, were tested. Have you ever wondered what really happens when the cameras are turned away, when the public spectacle fades, and only the insiders remain? This was that moment. The underbelly of the Governor Awards, a place where strategy, tension, and secrets collided. From the moment Harry and Meghan had entered, the aides and organizers had been on high alert. Security teams had adjusted positions subtly, scanning not just the crowd but the invisible threads of influence that ran through the room. Advisors whispered into discreet earpieces, their voices low but urgent, offering real-time guidance. Where to step, when to smile, when to pause. Every movement of the couple was being monitored, every micro-expression logged for future analysis. Yet, despite all preparation, there was something in the air that no training could account for: unpredictability. Human emotion is rarely predictable, and tonight it had a mind of its own. Backstage, tensions were layered. On one side were loyal aides, tasked with shielding the couple from harm, managing optics, and preserving their dignity. These individuals had rehearsed for months, anticipating every potential scenario, from casual murmurs to outright confrontation. On the other side were insiders who had their own agendas, quietly observing, quietly judging, quietly steering the narrative in ways invisible to the public. One whispered comment, one carefully timed gesture, could set off a ripple that would echo far beyond the walls of the ballroom. And tonight, those ripples were already beginning to spread. Among the whispers, there were surprising alliances. Some staffers who had long been skeptical of Harry and Meghan found themselves unexpectedly defending the couple, not out of loyalty, necessarily, but because the brewing chaos demanded a steady hand. Others, known for their connections to high-profile attendees and the political establishment, quietly exchanged glances, discussing strategy, calculating how this night might be leveraged for influence or personal gain. It was a delicate balancing act, navigating loyalties, controlling optics, and managing personalities that were often larger than life. Could a single misstep behind the scenes undo everything carefully planned on the main stage? Then there were the leaks. Subtle, almost imperceptible hints of backstage chatter had already made their way to social media, fueling speculation and intensifying the tension in the room. Who had said what and why? Why did some comments suggest premeditation, hints of orchestrated booze, or subtle sabotage? Insider sources whispered that certain guests had been strategically seated to provoke reactions, their presence designed not for celebration but for drama. Imagine being in a room where every smile, every nod, every suppressed chuckle could be interpreted as a signal, a warning, or a provocation. That was the invisible pressure pressing on the couple, and it was only just beginning to mount. Among the aides, one in particular had a reputation for anticipating crises before they happened. Their eyes darted across the room, noting every subtle shift in body language, every whispered exchange, and every camera lens trained on the couple. The task was Herculean: mitigate damage, shield the couple, and maintain an appearance of calm. Yet even the most seasoned professional knew that some moments were unpredictable, uncontainable. The crowd, with its unpredictable energy, was just one part of the challenge. The unseen alliances, hidden agendas, and whispered strategies backstage were another, and often more dangerous, because these moves could never be anticipated in real time. In the dimly lit corridors behind the main stage, conversations crackled with intensity. Some were strategic. Position the cameras at that angle, one whispered. Others were reactive. Did you see the smirk from table 3? That's going to spread online. And yet others carried hints of warning. Be careful what you say. Someone is recording everything. The air was charged with the kind of tension that precedes a revelation, that signals the calm before a storm. And there was a sense, unspoken but palpable, that tonight was not just about awards. It was about power, perception, and control. But not all whispers were meant to destabilize. Among the staff, some quietly offered reassurance. Keep calm, one said, voice soft but firm. They're expecting a reaction. Ignore it. Walk with purpose. Another nodded, adding, every step you take now sets the tone for the evening. Control your composure, and you control the narrative. These were small moments, almost invisible, yet they carried enormous weight. In a room where perception is everything, these words could anchor confidence, or be drowned out by the louder, more chaotic energy from the audience. It wasn't just the staff that carried influence. Even those who were seemingly neutral or even critical held power in subtle ways. Their whispered observations, the tilt of a head, the half-smile, all contributed to the narrative being formed behind the velvet curtain. One aide noted the irony. In public, the couple projected calm, grace, and authority. Backstage, the power dynamics were equally complex, unpredictable, and unforgiving. Every person, every gesture, every word had the potential to escalate tension or defuse it. The question lingered. Could anyone truly anticipate how this evening would unfold? Then, a new twist entered the mix. A staff member quietly handed a note to an advisor, who glanced at it quickly before passing it along. The contents were brief but incendiary, a reminder that certain high-profile guests were not just observers, but actors in a larger game. Their presence and reactions carefully calculated to provoke. The implication was clear. The couple was walking into a room where every reaction, every cheer, every whisper had a hidden layer, a meaning beyond the obvious. Could they navigate this web of unseen influence without faltering? Amidst all this, Harry and Meghan themselves remained largely unaware of the full extent of the backstage intrigue. From their perspective, they were entering an already tense room, navigating a crowd that had reacted in unpredictable ways. But the hidden currents behind the curtain, the whispers, the small alliances, the calculated provocations, were forces that would shape the narrative far beyond what they could see. It was a theater within a theater, an invisible stage upon which power, perception, and politics played out simultaneously. How would they respond when these currents inevitably collided with the public spectacle? As the couple paused momentarily near the backstage area, a whispered warning reached Meghan's ear, subtle yet unmistakable. Someone in the audience was recording everything, every subtle expression, every gesture, every reaction. And Harry, noting the tension around them, whispered to an aide, "This isn't just a room. It's a battlefield." And in that quiet acknowledgement, the unspoken truth was clear. Tonight was about far more than awards. It was about endurance, composure, and surviving the collision of expectation and judgment. The tension escalated further when an insider mentioned that a small group of influential guests had coordinated a subtle plan. Not overt hostility, but a sequence of gestures, murmurs, and expressions designed to test the couple's composure and generate maximum media buzz. Each movement, each micro-expression would be dissected online, spreading like wildfire within minutes. And as the couple prepared to make their way back toward the main stage, one aide realized something chilling. No amount of preparation could fully anticipate the cascade of reactions about to unfold. And then, a voice behind the curtain, low and cautious, whispered something that caught everyone off guard. This isn't about them anymore. It's about who controls the story, and we're all part of it. The words hung in the air, resonating through the backstage corridor, heavy with implication. Every ally, every skeptic, every observer understood immediately. The night had only just begun, and the true game of influence and perception was far from over. But what happened next would change the course of the evening, and no one, not even those backstage, saw it coming. The moment Harry and Meghan re-emerged from behind the velvet curtains, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted instantly. It was subtle at first, a few murmurs here, a cough there, but quickly it became impossible to ignore. The audience reacted as though a single signal had been given, a chain reaction triggered by the couple's measured stride and poised expressions. Could a room of dignitaries, celebrities, and high-profile figures really pivot from polite attention to palpable disapproval in seconds? Tonight, they did, and the result was electric. A low rumble of discontent began to swell, barely audible at first, but building steadily as more guests reacted. The murmurs escalated into whispers, which became audible words, and then small clusters of boos and hisses. It was almost musical in its cadence, a wave of sound moving from table to table, growing in intensity and clarity. Some guests tried to mask their reactions with polite laughter or coughs, but the undertone was unmistakable. Not everyone wanted the couple here. and even those who did were wary of the tension crackling in the air. Harry, ever vigilant, noticed the shift immediately. He scanned the room carefully, observing subtle reactions. The tight-lipped smiles, the raised eyebrows, the occasional rolled eyes. Meghan, walking slightly ahead, maintained her composure, but even she could not completely mask the brief flicker of surprise at the intensity of the crowd's response. Every step toward the stage was a test of resolve, every glance from the audience a subtle probe into confidence and control. Could they maintain their poise? Could they project grace under fire when the collective judgment of the room was so raw, so immediate, and so public? The boos grew louder. A few audience members even audibly called out, their voices sharp but controlled, challenging the couple's presence in what had been expected to be a celebratory evening. It was a collision of expectation versus reality. The Governor Awards, meant to recognize achievement and foster camaraderie, had become a high-stakes trial in perception, a test of poise, endurance, and public favor. And the irony was not lost on anyone present. The event designed to honor individuals had become a forum where the couple's every move was scrutinized, amplified, and judged in real time. But there were contradictions everywhere. While one corner of the room hissed or muttered in disapproval, another offered subtle support. Quiet nods, soft smiles, and even restrained applause. These pockets of encouragement created a strange, almost surreal dynamic. On one hand, Harry and Meghan were navigating hostility, a tide of judgmental stares and whispered critiques. On the other, small gestures of solidarity reminded them, and everyone observing, that they were not entirely alone. How do you respond when a room is simultaneously hostile and supportive? When applause and disapproval exist in the same moment, layered over one another like waves crashing against a cliff. The tension was palpable. Meanwhile, cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle flicker of emotion, and every carefully calculated step. Flashes illuminated the room, reflecting off glittering gowns, polished tables, and the silver accents of the awards themselves. Every captured frame had the potential to become viral content within minutes. Social media anticipation had already reached fever pitch, with insiders teasing the unfolding drama. Clips of the entrance, murmurs of disapproval, and snippets of subtle gestures that carried meaning far beyond what most observers realized. How could anyone prepare for the combined scrutiny of a live audience and a digital one, watching every moment from thousands of miles away? In the midst of the tension, subtle humor and irony emerged. Observers noted the juxtaposition of elegance and discord, the way chandeliers glimmered while whispers of disapproval grew louder, the contrast between poised smiles and audible sighs, the rhythm of applause competing against the crescendos of murmurs and hisses. There was something almost theatrical about the way the evening had evolved. This wasn't a simple awards ceremony anymore. It was a performance in perception, a masterclass in human emotion and reaction. Could the couple harness this energy, or would it overwhelm them? Direct questions began to form in the minds of those observing. What would Harry say if confronted with open disapproval? Would Meghan falter under scrutiny, or maintain her composure despite the audience's hostility? How much of the response was genuine emotion, and how much was carefully orchestrated to provoke a spectacle? And yet, even as these questions lingered, the moment intensified. Audience members who had previously remained passive now leaned in, murmurs growing into audibility, expressions sharpening, and eyes following every subtle gesture from the couple. Adding another layer of complexity, the dynamics of celebrity presence became immediately apparent. Some influential attendees exchanged glances, clearly discussing among themselves how to react. Others whispered into phones, perhaps alerting media teams or allies to subtle developments in real time. The room had become both a stage and a network of power plays. Every expression, every whispered comment, and every restrained clap feeding a broader narrative beyond the walls of the ballroom. Could Harry and Meghan maintain dominance over the optics in such a volatile environment? As they continued their measured approach toward the stage, the first overt reactions escalated. A small group at the far end of the room audibly booed, their voices sharper now, filled with a mix of disapproval and curiosity. A few chairs shuffled, signaling discomfort or an attempt to mask the reaction. Some guests whispered among themselves, their words impossible to catch, yet charged with meaning. Every element combined to create a sensory overload, sound, sight, and emotion colliding in a charged, almost palpable tension. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the source of the booze, calculating how best to respond. Meghan, walking just ahead, exuded calm authority, a carefully constructed armor of poise and elegance. Yet behind that exterior, subtle signs of stress flickered, a deepened inhale, a brief tightening of her jaw, a micro-adjustment of her posture. These fleeting movements, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, told the story of the stakes. The couple was walking a line between diplomacy and confrontation, grace and defiance. How long could they sustain such composure under this level of scrutiny? And then came an unexpected twist. A prominent figure in the audience, someone known for influence and media connections, gestured in a way that caught multiple cameras' attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but significant. A raised eyebrow, a slight shake of the head, a motion that whispered disapproval without words. Observers noted immediately that this single act could change the narrative overnight, become a focal point of discussion across social media and traditional media platforms alike. The ripple effect was inevitable. At the same time, other audience members began reacting to one another's responses. Where one person expressed disapproval, others mirrored it, creating clusters of dissent that amplified the tension further. Small pockets of support, meanwhile, offered a counterpoint, but they were dwarfed by the growing wave of hostility. The dynamics were complex. It was no longer about a simple yes or no, approval or disapproval. It had become a layered tableau of perception, judgment, and social signaling. Every movement, every expression, every breath was loaded with meaning. Direct engagement with the audience became impossible, yet the energy demanded acknowledgement. Could the couple ignore the subtle choreography of disapproval unfolding around them, or would the need to respond, physically, emotionally, strategically, change their trajectory? The ballroom was a storm of perception, the eye of which Harry and Meghan had entered without fully knowing how deep it would be. And as they finally reached the front of the room, moments from standing center stage, a collective gasp rippled through the audience. Something had just happened. Something unexpected, immediate, and potentially explosive. But what happened next would shift the narrative entirely, and no one in that room, or watching from afar, saw it coming. The room had already shifted when Harry and Meghan reached the front, but what truly escalated the tension was not the booze, the whispers, or even the subtle gestures of disapproval. It was the reactions of those sitting closest to the couple, the celebrities, the high-profile figures whose presence alone could sway perception and, in some cases, determine narrative. Have you ever wondered how a single smirk, a whispered remark, or a deliberate nod can ripple across an entire room, influencing not just the audience present, but the millions watching from screens around the world? Tonight, every glance and gesture carried immense weight, and the implications were impossible to ignore. From the very first moment the couple's eyes swept across the room, it became apparent that not all reactions were equal. Some were supportive, subtle, but unmistakable. A discreet nod here, a smile that lingered a fraction longer than expected, a whispered word of encouragement. These gestures, while quiet, provided small islands of reassurance amidst a sea of judgment and skepticism. Yet, juxtaposed against these were the sharper, more calculated reactions: raised eyebrows, slight scoffs, deliberate avoidance of eye contact, and even what some observers later called coordinated sighs of disdain. Every movement was charged with meaning, every expression a layer in an unfolding drama that transcended the awards ceremony itself. For Harry and Meghan, the stakes were immediate and personal. These were not just celebrities. These were powerful voices in global media, culture, and philanthropy. Their reactions could shape headlines, influence public opinion, and impact the couple's broader reputation. And in real time, the couple had to navigate this maze with composure, projecting grace while internally calibrating their responses. Can you imagine the pressure of walking into a room where every smile could be a trap, every whisper a critique, and every gesture a subtle test of your resolve? It was a psychological gauntlet, a high-stakes performance that demanded flawless awareness. The first notable reaction came from an unexpected corner. A renowned actor, seated near the back but highly visible to cameras, leaned slightly forward and whispered something inaudible to their companion. The brief exchange, captured on multiple lenses, was dissected immediately by social media commentators. Was it sympathy, mockery, or a subtle critique? The ambiguity itself added to the tension, forcing viewers, both present and online, to parse meaning from every micro-expression. Harry caught the motion from the corner of his eye, registering it with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to reading people, but it added another layer to the intricate psychological landscape of the evening. Meanwhile, another celebrity, known for their outspoken commentary on social media, maintained a fixed gaze on the couple, lips pressed together, a barely perceptible frown forming. Observers noted that this individual's presence alone could influence the perceptions of others at nearby tables. It was a ripple effect in motion, one high-profile reaction, amplified by proximity and media attention, generating a wave of subtle mimicry across the audience. The room was a complex ecosystem of influence, where one reaction could trigger many more, all feeding into a growing narrative of tension and uncertainty. But there were also surprises. Some attendees, long thought to be neutral or even critical, displayed unexpected support. A discreet gesture of reassurance here, a whispered compliment there, small acts that were almost imperceptible but powerful in their effect. These moments offered a counterbalance to the tension, creating a subtle but important layer of intrigue. Why did certain individuals choose to support the couple quietly, without drawing attention? Was it loyalty, strategy, or simply an understanding of the spectacle unfolding before them? The answers were layered, often contradictory, and impossible to discern fully in the moment. Audience members themselves became participants in a kind of silent theater. Whispers traveled quickly, fueled by curiosity and a sense of anticipation. Who would react first? How? And with what intensity? Some guests exchanged conspiratorial glances, seemingly coordinating subtle expressions or murmurs designed to elicit specific responses from the couple. Others appeared to act independently, their gestures organic yet impactful. The cumulative effect was a tapestry of reaction and counter-reaction, a delicate choreography of influence, judgment, and perception. Could Harry and Meghan anticipate every nuance, every subtle signal, every possible micro-expression? The answer was almost certainly no, and that uncertainty intensified the stakes. Direct questions to the audience become unavoidable here. If you were in Harry or Meghan's position, how would you interpret these gestures? Would a small smirk seem harmless, or a deliberate avoidance of eye contact feel like a targeted slight? How do you maintain composure in a room where every expression carries multiple layers of meaning, where every glance could be loaded with critique, and where millions watching online are parsing your every micro-movement for insight? This is the reality of navigating not just a high-profile event, but a space saturated with social, cultural, and media significance. The tension reached a new peak when a particularly prominent figure in the room, a household name, influential across media and social circles, leaned forward and exchanged a brief, pointed remark with their companion. The cameras caught the movement, and in that instant, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. What was said? Was it criticism, observation, or a subtle act of manipulation? The ambiguity intensified the drama, forcing everyone present, and every viewer watching online, to project their own interpretations onto the moment. Simultaneously, some celebrities engaged in whispered exchanges, likely relaying impressions of the entrants or coordinating subtle responses. The effect was almost theatrical, a carefully staged dance of perception and influence that played out silently beneath the veneer of elegance. Every reaction, every whispered word, every subtle gesture became part of a growing narrative. Harry and Meghan were not merely guests. They were catalysts in a high-stakes social experiment, tested at every turn, analyzed by both peers and the global audience alike. And then came the unexpected, an overt gesture of disapproval, executed with precision and captured perfectly by the cameras. A hand raised in a subtle, dismissive wave, a slight head shake, a smirk barely visible in the soft lighting. Observers later noted that this single act would dominate conversations online for hours, its significance debated endlessly across platforms. The ripple effect was immediate. Murmurs amplified, attention intensified, and the narrative of tension solidified. The evening, meant for celebration, had transformed into a theater of psychological intensity. Through it all, Harry and Meghan maintained remarkable composure, but the tension was palpable. Every step, every glance, every measured smile was a masterclass in poise under pressure. Yet beneath the surface, subtle signs betrayed the strain: a slight tightening of the jaw, a controlled inhale, a micro-adjustment in posture. These small signals, though invisible to most, told a story of vigilance, strategy, and emotional calculation. Could anyone maintain perfect control under such conditions? Could grace withstand such scrutiny, layered with judgment, critique, and subtle acts of provocation from some of the most influential figures in the room? And then, just as the couple approached the stage, a whispered exchange between two seated celebrities triggered a reaction that no one anticipated. A brief nod, a subtle motion, almost imperceptible, but significant. Cameras caught it, social media amplified it, and the room seemed to pivot ever so slightly. It was a reminder that in this space, nothing was purely ceremonial. Everything carried consequence, and every expression could become part of a viral moment, a headline, or a whispered rumor that would spread beyond the walls of the ballroom. The energy in the room had now reached an almost unbearable intensity. Support and disapproval existed side by side, contradictions layered upon contradictions. The audience was not merely watching. They were participating, influencing, and amplifying the tension. Harry and Meghan were at the epicenter of a carefully orchestrated spectacle, yet the orchestration was only partly predictable. Unseen forces, subtle alliances, whispered agreements, and carefully planned gestures all converged to create a storm of perception that was both exhilarating and dangerous. And just when it seemed the intensity could not escalate further, someone in the crowd, an unexpected figure, neither ally nor enemy, executed a move so deliberate, so perfectly timed, that it redirected the attention of the entire room. Cameras pivoted, whispers intensified, and social media chatter surged before the night had even progressed another step. But what happened next would ignite conversations worldwide, and no one, not even the most seasoned insiders, saw it coming. The ballroom had already transformed into a charged arena. Every whisper, every gasp, every flicker of expression had amplified the tension, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what came next. The governor, seated at the front and long accustomed to commanding attention, cleared his throat and leaned slightly forward. The room instinctively quieted, as if sensing that a single sentence from his mouth could tilt the balance of the evening. And then he spoke, calm, deliberate, and with a weight that carried through every corner of the room. Have you ever been in a situation where a single statement can stop an entire crowd in its tracks? That's exactly what happened. The governor's words were measured, carefully chosen, yet they carried an edge of authority and judgment that sent ripples across the audience. For a moment, the boos, whispers, and murmurs faded into silence, replaced by a tense curiosity. What was he about to say, and how would it reshape the narrative that had been building since the couple's entrance? Harry and Meghan exchanged a brief glance, subtle but loaded with meaning. Both recognized immediately that this was more than ceremonial protocol. It was a moment that could define perception, influence headlines, and alter the trajectory of the evening. Meghan's posture remained regal, her shoulders squared, but the slight narrowing of her eyes betrayed awareness of the stakes. Harry, as always, maintained a calm exterior, yet his gaze swept the room carefully, noting every subtle reaction to the governor's words. Could a single declaration influence not just the audience's opinion, but the entire media narrative for the night and beyond? The statement itself was startling in its ambiguity. On the surface, it appeared to praise the couple, acknowledging their contributions to philanthropic efforts and their public service. Yet beneath the surface, the phrasing was loaded with subtle insinuation. Observers would later debate whether it was a veiled critique or an oblique warning, a reminder that recognition came with scrutiny, and that the audience's reaction was being watched closely by both insiders and the wider world. The duality was deliberate. One sentence could appear supportive while simultaneously stoking tension. How would Harry and Meghan respond to such layered messaging, particularly in a room already crackling with judgment and expectation? As the statement reverberated through the ballroom, the reactions were immediate and revealing. Some guests nodded politely, accepting the words at face value. Others exchanged quick glances, whispers, and subtle gestures that indicated they had perceived the underlying insinuation. The microcosm of human reaction was fascinating, a study in social dynamics and perception. Who interpreted the statement as genuine praise? Who saw it as a calculated reminder of their precarious position? And how would these interpretations feed into the ongoing narrative both in the room and online? Harry's response was almost imperceptible yet deliberate. A small, measured nod, acknowledgement without overcommitment, projecting composure while internally processing the complex social web around him. Meghan mirrored his poise, adjusting her posture with precision, ensuring that her response remained elegant, controlled, and unassailable. Every subtle movement was a negotiation with the invisible currents of judgment, influence, and expectation. Could anyone maintain such control in the face of an audience that oscillated between support, skepticism, and disapproval within moments? The answer lay in discipline, awareness, and the ability to project confidence under extreme scrutiny. The audience's reactions continued to layer over one another. A whisper here, a cough there, subtle nods, and restrained eye rolls combined to create a living map of perception in motion. Celebrities, dignitaries, and influencers exchanged almost imperceptible cues, signaling their interpretations of the governor's statement and the couple's response. The room had become a complex dance of observation and reaction, a chessboard of influence where every micro-expression carried weight. How does one navigate a space where even a subtle smile or a slight head tilt can ripple outward into public speculation, viral moments, or media commentary? Harry and Meghan were doing exactly that, and the stakes were nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, even as the governor concluded his statement, an unexpected twist emerged. One of the more outspoken audience members, seated strategically near the cameras, let out a quiet, audible sigh that carried across the room. Observers immediately noticed it, a signal of disapproval or impatience, depending on interpretation, and social media buzzed almost instantly with speculation. Within minutes, the sigh had been captured in multiple photos and clips, analyzed and debated by commentators worldwide. How could a single, understated gesture ignite such a chain reaction? This was the power of perception, the amplified stakes of high-profile appearances, and the relentless scrutiny the couple had become accustomed to navigating. Behind the scenes, aides whispered to one another in a delicate choreography of crisis management. Every moment was under assessment. The governor's words, audience reactions, and the couple's subtle adjustments. The backstage tension mirrored the visible drama in the ballroom, adding layers of complexity and uncertainty. Could the event continue without escalating into chaos? Or was the evening already teetering on the brink of a public spectacle that would dominate headlines for weeks? The answer remained uncertain, and every participant in the room, guest, aide, or observer, was acutely aware of the stakes. In a further twist, some celebrities who had previously seemed neutral now reacted in unexpected ways. A subtle clap, a whispered comment, a slight shift in posture, all of which contributed to an evolving narrative. Observers could see that alliances and loyalties were being tested, that hidden agendas were influencing behavior in ways not immediately apparent. The governor's words had acted as a catalyst, exposing fractures, alliances, and unspoken tensions within the audience. Every nuance mattered, every reaction carried potential consequence, and the couple had to navigate it all with precision and awareness. Harry and Meghan's ability to maintain composure amid such a charged environment was extraordinary. Meghan's calm smile, Harry's measured nods, and the subtle yet deliberate way they moved together projected unity and poise. Yet beneath the surface, the psychological load was immense. Every gesture was being scrutinized, every expression analyzed, every movement captured and replayed in real time. Could anyone withstand that level of intensity without cracking? The question loomed, a silent tension threading through the room, palpable in every whispered comment and every sharpened glance. And then, just as the couple appeared to navigate the immediate impact of the governor's statement, something occurred that none of the aides, security teams, or observers had anticipated. A brief, almost imperceptible interaction between two prominent guests created a ripple effect that amplified tension, drawing attention from cameras, social media, and the audience alike. The movement was subtle but loaded with implication. A glance, a tilt of the head, a whispered comment that was somehow audible enough to be captured and dissected instantly. In an instant, the atmosphere in the ballroom became even more electrified. Guests reacted to one another as much as to the couple, creating a layered, almost theatrical tableau of judgment, intrigue, and influence. It was clear that tonight's events would not be contained within the walls of the Governor Awards. Headlines would follow, social media posts would erupt, and the ripple of this singular statement would extend far beyond the evening itself. But what came next would transform the energy of the room entirely. And no one could have anticipated the impact it would have on Harry, Meghan, and the unfolding narrative of the night. The instant the governor's statement landed, the energy in the ballroom shifted in ways that were almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but impossible to miss for those attuned to nuance, especially the cameras. From every angle, lenses captured subtle microexpressions, faint gasps, and the almost imperceptible ripple of movement across tables. And outside the ballroom, the world was already watching. Paparazzi, social media monitors, and journalists with live feeds pounced instantly, amplifying every flicker of emotion into a potential viral moment. Have you ever seen a room respond as if it were a living organism, every reaction feeding off the other, every gesture creating a cascade that no one could stop? That's exactly what happened. A ripple of murmurs in one corner became a wave in another. Laughter, soft at first, was soon mirrored elsewhere. Subtle applause met equally subtle sighs. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing these moments, freezing them in frames that would later dominate news feeds, entertainment blogs, and viral compilations. Every reaction was a story in itself. Harry and Meghan were acutely aware of the scrutiny. Harry's eyes moved strategically, scanning both audience and media, projecting calm, controlling his posture, and modulating expressions to avoid misinterpretation. Meghan's smile remained poised, but her eyes betrayed an acute awareness of the lenses trained on her every micromovement. They were in a hall of mirrors. Every action reflected, refracted, and amplified across platforms in real time. Could anyone survive such relentless attention without cracking? Tonight, the couple's every movement would be scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected with ruthless precision. The cameras were merciless. One caught a barely noticeable flicker of tension in Meghan's smile, while another caught Harry's slight tightening of his jaw, a movement imperceptible to the naked eye, but magnified across thousands of pixels and live streams. Social media exploded almost instantaneously. Clips of the couple's entrance circulated, annotated with commentary ranging from admiration to critique, from sympathetic analysis to snide remarks. Within minutes, the story of the evening was no longer confined to the ballroom. It was global, amplified by networks of influencers, journalists, and fan accounts, each eager to provide their interpretation. And yet, the crowd itself became part of the spectacle. Guests who had initially remained passive now began reacting to the cameras as much as to the couple. Some posed subtly, attempting to capture their own image or a moment of personal relevance. Others adjusted their gestures, subconsciously aware that their reactions were being recorded and would contribute to the growing narrative. The interplay between the couple, the audience, and the media created a living feedback loop, a dynamic where every glance, every smirk, every motion was amplified exponentially. Unexpectedly, humor and irony began to surface amidst the tension. Observers noted the contrast between the gravity of the audience's disapproval and the glamour of the event itself. Chandeliers glittered, gowns shimmered, and yet the undercurrent of judgment persisted, creating a surreal juxtaposition, elegance and tension, poise and hostility, spectacle and scrutiny coexisting in the same room. This duality heightened the suspense, keeping viewers, both in the ballroom and online, on edge. How would the couple navigate this unique environment, where both admiration and critique existed side by side? The first viral clip emerged almost immediately. A subtle, barely noticeable exchange between a few audience members was captured and shared across multiple social media platforms within seconds. Analysis ensued. What did it mean? Who were they referencing? And how would it affect the evening's narrative? This small moment, amplified by cameras and digital networks, demonstrated the power of perception in the modern media landscape. The room itself became secondary. The real drama was now simultaneously in the hands of the public, commentators, and analysts worldwide. Harry and Meghan continued their measured approach, fully aware of the dual performance required. Maintain composure for the audience in front of them while navigating the unpredictable influence of global observation. Every blink, every smile, every tilt of the head carried weight, each capable of triggering commentary, speculation, or controversy. Observers would later debate whether the couple's poise was deliberate strategy, instinctual grace, or a mixture of both. What was indisputable, however, was that their awareness of the cameras heightened every movement, every glance, every subtle gesture into an event with immediate and far-reaching consequences. Behind the scenes, aides and advisors worked frantically to maintain order. Camera feeds were monitored, social media alerts flagged trending clips, and communications were sent discreetly to manage optics. One aide whispered, "Every micro-moment counts. If they falter, the narrative shifts instantly." Another nodded, eyes fixed on the screen showing a close-up of Meghan's subtle expression, understanding the stakes. The digital audience was not passive. It was active, engaged, and ready to interpret every motion. Could anyone truly control how the world perceived them under such conditions? The paparazzi frenzy intensified further when a high-profile photographer captured a brief, almost imperceptible moment. Harry's hand brushing lightly against Meghan's as they approached the stage. To the casual observer, it was a simple gesture of reassurance.